Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
Banner got hung up on itself.
Back to Banner and Fat Albert here.
These banners, folks, are available at fairtaxstore.org.
Mm-hmm.
And for a nominal fee, pick up two. Because you're going to want to be out on the street. You're going to want to be at the town hall meetings. You're going to want to be at all of the rallies that go on in the coming months as the 2024 election cycle ensues, because you want to be able to make an impression. FAIRtax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're just like $2.50 each, and shipping is free.
Cheap at twice the price.
Absolutely.
A couple of them. Hey, these make great stocking stuffers for Christmas.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's getting to be about that time again, isn't it?
With the oranges, you can slide them in with the oranges or the coal. Slide them right down, put them in a baggie, slide them right down in the stocking. And the kids will love it because they'll be outside playing. After Christmas, they'll have all those nice toys, electronic toys, but they'll want to go outside and do this in the front yard. As people. So there you go.
All right. Well, how interesting that was an interesting conversation we had with Steve Hayes last week.
It's always good to have Mr. Hayes on. He is a font of information because he's been advocating and working hard for the FAIRtax for literally since the beginning and even before. He has an interesting story to tell about before the FAIRtax.
Absolutely. Well, he brought up a thing that I had never really thought of, that assistance, school vouchers and stuff that a lot of the states are doing now to help parents send their kids to better schools, that they're trying to figure out that may be considered taxable income in some cases. So you need to read last week's chairman's report available at fairtax.org. And catch last week's FAIRtax Power Radio as well. That's an interesting topic. We may have to get him back and have him elaborate on that a little bit. But for now, I did not get to do this last week because we don't do Congress.gov when we have a guest on. But we have got some goodies to go through as to what the Congress critters are doing to the tax code now that they've got the Speaker of the House situation all resolved. They are back to full force, proposing stuff to put into the tax code. And the first one for today is going to be H.R. 6332, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code, get this, to limit the participation of staff of the Internal Revenue Service in conferences being carried out by the Independent Office of Appeals for the purpose of resolving a taxpayer dispute. Got that?
6632. I'm getting ready to follow you on this one, buddy, because
yes, 6332 doesn't have any text in it yet. This is Representative Monica de la Cruz in Texas to limit the participation of the staff of the Internal Revenue Service. So IRS employees are going to be limited in what they can do in conferences being carried out by the Independent Office of Appeals. Sounds like if the IRS makes a ruling and the taxpayer appeals it, there's this Independent Office of Appeals, and this bill is going to try to limit to the degree to which staff of the Internal Revenue Service can participate in these conferences that are carried out by the Independent Office of Appeals when there's a dispute between the taxpayer and the IRS.
Not very appealing.
Yes, indeed. Well, don't you just love having a tax code where something like that is even necessary?
Well, and the whole thing about the tax code being used for pushing legislation just skews it increases the complexity and it makes it more difficult for small business and individuals, especially because we're the ones that are paying retail prices for tax guidance.
Okay, let's move on here. This one I don't think qualifies for the Hall of Shame, but it definitely falls under the heading of really? Is this really in the tax code? This is H.R. 6295 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide that the 50% limitation on the deduction for meal expenses, that limitation does not apply to meals provided on certain fishing boats or at certain fish processing facilities. I'm sorry, that one makes me laugh. Oh, man.
Somebody in Florida that brought this up. Is that what we're dealing with here?
Is that for real? Though actually that came from the other side of the country. That's Susan Delbene, Delbene, who's out in the state of Washington. Introduced that one to provide that the 50% limitation on the deduction for meal expenses does not apply to meals provided on certain fishing boats or at certain fish processing facilities. I guess they've got a lot of fishing boats and stuff out there in Washington.
It's just crazy, absolutely crazy. Fishing.
That's what we need to get rid of and replace all of this madness with the FAIRtax. That's why we do this every week. We go to congress.gov, put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes at the top, and make sure you're looking just at legislation in the current Congress. As of today, when we're recording this, 1,142 hits on that search, including, and this is another one that, well, what's income and what's not income? This is a S3243, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude all military retirement and related benefits from federal income tax, which on the surface sounds like a nice thing to do, but then you realize, well, wait a minute, if we're going to give this exclusion to military retirement, why not retired police officers, retired firefighters, retired, teachers? The list can go on. Various groups of people who deserve to have their benefits immune from federal income tax. But before long, I mean, this is just picking winners and losers again, and this needs to go away.
Away.
I say, are you still there? We'll do that one. Okay. Let's continue on down here. This is the next one. This is another one for, what counts as income and what doesn't. HR 6226, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide an exemption from gross income for mandatory restitution or civil damages as recompense for trafficking in person. I'm not sure I fully understand that one, but that's because there's no text in it either. But it says to provide an exemption from gross income for mandatory restitution or civil damages as recompense for trafficking in person. So I guess if a human trafficker has to pay you restitution or you're awarded civil damages against a human trafficker, that what you get from that settlement is going to be exempt from gross income under this bill. That's what it looks like.
People have too much time on their hands I mean, this is just, I can understand that there's probably parts of the world that work in another dimension than where I live, but I just don't understand some of the verbiage that's used, that people are actually sitting around, staff members, putting this together. What is the meaning of trafficking in person? Recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, etc.
Okay. Can't have a tax code without that, though, can you?
Telling you, help is available if you need it.
All right, one more here. This is HR 6223, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to remove a requirement for payment settlement entities to file returns relating to certain participating payees. That's Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania. I have no clue what he's proposing here. It just says to remove a requirement for payment settlement entities to file returns. Apparently, whatever these payment settlement entities have to file returns in some cases, and this bill is trying to remove that requirement for filing returns relating to certain participating payees. More complexity, more gobbledygook in the tax code that we just can't figure out what it means. So get rid of it.
Crazy.
Pass the FAIRtax and get rid of all this craziness. And that's why we do this every week, to show people just how insane the tax code is and is becoming. And of course, what was it that Steve mentioned last week? He was quoting President Lincoln, the best way to get rid of a bad law is to enforce it strictly.
Yes.
The best way to get rid of the income tax, which is a bad law, is to show people what's in it.
Well, and that's true. I mean, who has the time though? We're all, 50,000 different things going on in each person's lives at any moment in time. It's difficult enough as it is to throw the income tax on top of that. But again, we're in a generation now that has never existed without an income tax. So we say, well, this is the way it is, but it doesn't have to be this way. And I think that's one of the things that people are waking up to. If you can clear the smoke out of the way from the media, if you can clear the smoke out of the way from conversations with people that, think they know what's going on, but really have only a superficial understanding of what the fair tax is, and really dig in. And that's what we hope to do for the remainder of the program today, is to kind of get into the nuts and bolts a little bit about some of the questions that people may have.
Yeah, we have done this before, but hopefully as we get new eyes and ears on the program, we can explain to folks and tell them that FAIRtax.org is a tremendous resource if you want to educate yourself on the fair tax. But we go back every now and then and dig into their FAQ. And as I believe if you go far enough back in the FAIRtax Power Radio archives, we may have talked on this before, but let's do it again. How does the fair tax protect low-income families and individuals and retirees on fixed incomes? That is the second question down in the fair tax FAQ. How do we make sure, in other words, how do we make sure that the fair tax is fair?
Correct. And of course, you pay the fair tax when you buy something new, and only then. And the prebate helps out too. But let's go through, answer the question as it's relating into the frequently asked questions page on FAIRtax.org. Under the fair tax plan, poor people pay no net fair tax at all up to the poverty level. No net fair tax at all up to the poverty level. Every household receives a rebate that is equal to the fair tax paid on essential goods and services, and you get to determine what essential is. Wage earners are no longer subject to the most regressive and burdensome tax of all, the payroll tax. Those spending at twice the poverty level pay a tax of only 11.5%, a rate much lower than the income and payroll tax burden that they bear today.
Yeah, people need to understand the rebate is a refund, or the prebate as we call it, is a refund of the fair tax you pay on all of your spending up to the poverty level. And we kind of assume that if you're spending at the poverty level, you are buying your basic necessities first. You're not going to book a Hawaiian cruise or, a European vacation or something like that if you're living on poverty level income, and you're not going to do that other stuff before you pay the rent and pay the light bill and buy food and stuff like that. But it drives me nuts, Bob. We've looked at some of these articles in the past, several episodes here on FAIRtax Power Radio, where different authors are supposedly analyzing the fair tax and telling people about it. And then we've seen article after article after article that just kind of casually mentions the prebate. Oh, this thing has got rebates in it. But then the next sentence, they just blow it off. These things are not likely to make the tax burden any worse, when they're actually making people that are spending right at the poverty level pay absolutely zero out of their pocket. Now, yes, they pay it at the cash register, but they get every penny of it back in the prebate. So the prebate is not something that can just be easily blown off into the weeds and dismissed as inconsequential, and it is not a universal basic income, as some people have been trying to say. It is a refund of the taxes you pay on your spending for your basic necessities. And if that's all you got money to buy, you got a very low income and you can only afford to buy basic necessities, your tax burden under the fair tax is zero.
Well, and the prebate is based on what is called the federal poverty level.
Yeah, the family consumption allowance. That's how much you can spend tax-free.
So the numbers are calculated for individuals, for a family of two, 3 or 4 or more. And every year when this adjusted federal poverty level dollar amount is released, the change is made to the amount of money that is calculated for distribution. And you have to think of it like this. You get the tax refund. You do all your taxes. You send the stuff in April 15th. They should make it April 1st, so you could say it's April Fool's Day, but it's April 15th, and you send in all your stuff on form whatever, and then you wait for your refund so you can go get that giant television set you've had your eye on, or whatever it is you're going to spend it on. But you get that money back one time a year with no interest because they've taken it out. And so you have to think of it like this. FAIRtax, every month, you're going to spend X amount of dollars on essentials, what you would consider to be an essential good or service that your family would need or that you as an individual would need. So based on the structure of your family, how many people are in it, you get that money ahead of your spending it. So you actually have it in your pocket. So back to what you said a minute ago, a lot of people say, oh, it's an entitlement. It's going to be it's a universal basic income. Nothing of the sort. It is your money that you're getting ahead of spending it. You're going to go right out the next day probably and buy some groceries, or maybe you're going to buy a case of beer, or maybe you're going to buy a tire or two for your car. What you would consider to be essential. The other side of it is the fact that you end up having your federal payroll tax and the income tax at the federal level taken out of your check. So you're going to get getting more money on that side too.
Yeah, the FAIRtax gets rid of the federal payroll taxes, the taxes that support Social Security and Medicare. It does not cut off the funding for them. It extends the tax base for those programs. But those payroll taxes go away. And again, we've noted time and time again that those are the most regressive federal taxes there are, because there is no standard deduction from it. That is taken from you off of every dollar that you earn, and you get the same percentage taken away from you no matter how much you're making. And that's just the textbook definition of regressive. And people that try to bash the FAIRtax as being regressive because it's a sales tax, A, don't understand how the prebate works, and B, don't understand that the FAIRtax gets rid of the most regressive taxes that are out there. But Bob, let me ask you something else that I really hadn't thought of this before. When there's an economic slowdown, or a recession, economic activity slows down, people get laid off, who gets impacted the most by something like that? Would it be someone working for a minimum wage or somebody like Elon Musk?
Minimum wage person.
There you go. Economic slowdowns are going to hurt the lower income families much more so than those at the top of the scale. Breadwinners in those families most likely to lose their jobs. Then they're least likely to have resources to help them weather a bad time. A lot of folks that are living paycheck to paycheck, I mean, they get laid off and they're just gone. There's nothing back to hold on to them. And the FAIRtax will dramatically improve the lives for those people because of the economic growth that it will stimulate.
Right. And we think we're living in a booming economy now, which can be debated on, is it economic policy at the federal level that's bringing about more people in the workforce, or is it just we're finally returning to work after the pandemic shut down the country, and now reality is people are returning to work. The present tax system makes economic progress needlessly slow, thus harming low-income people the most. The FAIRtax goes into effect, the next paycheck that individual or that family receives is going to be void of the federal income taxes, the payroll tax, and all federal taxes withheld. So you'll
bring home a much bigger paycheck, even without the boss having to give you a raise. And
then here we go. At the first of the month, you end up getting the prebate. So you've got that in your pocket as well. And as I always like to say, the FAIRtax encourages savings And I think for low income people that are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever, they can continue to do that if they want to. But now there's an opportunity to look down a long view and say, I can start saving for my grandkids, for my children. I can start putting some money away and begin to encourage that in families, in young people, where before you couldn't think about that because you're going to pay the light bill and the gas to get to work, and you're going to pay the daycare and all these other bills that you have to pay. Now you might be able to find some breathing room, and that economy booming on the instance of fair tax enactment is going to be phenomenal.
All right, let me ask you another question here. Is it fair? We're talking about the fair tax now. Is it fair that rich families and poor families both get the very same prebate? What you think?
Well, I think so. The billionaire is going to spend money on yachts and travel and things like that, and probably new mansions and all. He's going to pay whatever he's going to pay. He's going to get, the prebate. And the FAQ article, it's listed as $4,697, assuming he's married and has no children.
Yeah, those are probably old figures. But if a billionaire says spends $10 million, he'll pay $2,300,000 out of his pocket, of which he gets back only $4,697. I should have looked up a more recent prebate card. I'm sure that number is a bit higher now. But a billionaire who is spending literally millions of dollars is going to have a very, very small percentage of the tax he pays given back to him in the prebate. I mean, he's entitled to have his basic necessities tax-free, just like everybody else. But the billionaire is going to spend a lot, have very little of his tax burden covered by the prebate, and take a lot out of his pocket. In fact, you can spend enough so that your effective tax rate out of pocket is almost a full 23%. But married individuals and incomes, middle income married couple with no children, if they spend $50,000, these older numbers say it's 6,803 is how much they'll take out of their pocket. So they will spend that much. Their tax rate, effective out of pocket tax rate, 13.6%.
Much lower than the calculated 23.
Yes, that's what people don't understand. That's another thing when people talk about the prebate and they blow it off. They do not examine the prebate's effect at actually lowering the out-of-pocket tax rate that people will pay. So yeah, it's perfectly fair for a billionaire and a middle-income family and a low-income family all to get their basic necessities taken care of. That's just, filed under the heading of treating everybody equally. But then the way it works, if you spend a lot of money, your out-of-pocket tax rate goes up quite a bit. If you spend a moderate amount of money, then you have a moderate tax rate, like 13.6% on $50,000. And again, if you're spending right at the poverty level, your tax rate is 0.
And can we talk about what happens when you buy a used car or
Certainly.
used clothes or
Go right ahead.
House? While Mr. Paxton is chugging down, no pun intended, because of the trains behind him, but he's chugging down Cheerwine, which is probably the best drink ever made, ever.
Right there in North Carolina.
In Salisbury. And if you start looking at what you spend money on, and this goes back to the microscope and understanding savings and the opportunity to save within the benefit, one of the benefits of the fair tax. You go buy a used house, there's already been a transaction made on it. Deeds passed over once. Now
talked about that with Steve last week. He brought that up.
And all of a sudden, you're not paying tax on that home purchase. $400,000 house costs you $400,000 cash. And that's the same for a used vehicle or used clothing. I think it's going to really shake up the markets. The value of a new car. You may see a change at the dealerships based on whether the market is going to be there for them. Used cars will all of a sudden gain in popularity and probably price. because of if their availability is a finite number, a used car, how many used cars are there in the world?
Yeah, well, there will have to be new ones to replace them every year. Some people will say that, gee, the FAIRtax is going to kill demand for new products. Well, no, actually, you've got to keep making new ones so you'll have used ones in the market a bit later. And yeah,
Well,
say that the price equilibrium will probably narrow a bit between the price of a new one and the price of a used one.
I think so.
That's all right. Well, I tell you what, we can spend a long time here in the FAIRtax.org FAQ. There are a lot of different questions there and a lot of different nuances. So we would encourage people that if you want to get yourself a quick education on what it is, how it works, how it impacts different things, read through that FAQ. We got about 2 minutes left here. And so, Bob, I want to get into promoting again, steering people towards this new X, formerly known as Twitter platform, because we're trying the kind of behind the scenes here that we got some folks that are trying really hard to put together a schedule of these X spaces, which are just online conversations. And I mean, real life spoken conversations, not like internet chat rooms where you had to type your stuff, but we will be having, and we will continue to have, and hopefully we can get this schedule worked out pretty well, where you can have several different hosts that will be on these spaces educating people about the FAIRtax.
That's correct. And just all you have to do is go to X, formerly known as Twitter, and search for FAIRtax Official. Follow FAIRtax Official, and the spaces programs are becoming more gelled on a regular day at a regular time. And we want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is happening on a cycle that is focusing on Tuesdays and Fridays at various times across the time zones. So it's convenient for people who may be available at those times. So we encourage you to, while you have it on your mind, to go to Twitter, formerly now called X, and say FAIRtax Official, follow, and be ready, because we're going to open these up. We'll have a topic, but we're going to open them up for a lot of questions.
Yeah. If you find a space that is live and in progress as you find it, you may join the conversation. It's a moderated conversation. The hosts there have control over who can speak, so it does not become just a free for all with everybody shouting over everybody. One person at a time can speak. But if you can find a live one that's in progress, you can join the conversation. But if you don't get the live one, these are still available. They're archived, so you can go back and listen to a previous conversation. And I would certainly steer people to go back and listen to the one that we had with John Linder a few weeks ago.
Yeah, fantastic mind of the FAIRtax. Wrote the FAIRtax book with Neil Bortz, Atlanta congressman, Georgia congressman in the House of Representatives, who has shepherded this and is still involved in the inner workings of promoting the FAIRtax HR 25.
All right. Well, quickly, you can write to us, the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com, if you've got a question or a comment or an idea that you'd like us to talk about here on the show. That is going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. We're all slap out of time again. Again, thank you so much for watching, listening, sharing the videos, listening on the radio stations and things like that. Tell all your family and friends about the FAIRtax, about the program, and if we get enough folks behind us, we're going to get this thing passed. Amen. So until we meet again, we are the FAIRtax Guys. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
Reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
we'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid. Also, any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that Send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but,